Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Tom. This is Tom's Comic Curios, the comic channel where you hear about comics that nobody else talks about on YouTube. Before I get to the comic book today, I'm going to be talking about. I just want to say thank you to everybody that has subscribed to me and the comments I've been getting. I almost didn't continue with this channel. I don't know if I want to do this or not. But I've been getting so many nice comments and inspiration from my friends to continue this channel, and that it's really inspiring me. So I want to say, like, it really feels good getting comments from you guys out there, from you people, because you've written me some really supportive and nice comments. Like, I'm surprised. I'm really surprised that people are enjoying this. Like hearing me talk about my favorite comics. I'm surprised people are interested, that they're enjoying it, and that they're taking the time to watch these videos. Even though, I mean, just one video, that Boris the Bear is the only one that's there so far. But here we are with a second video. And I have a great group of people. And I want to say some of my best friends have subscribed to this channel. You know who you are. And the people that are subscribed, like most of them, they have their own channels on YouTube, and they have all different types of channels. They do all different types of things on their channels. And it's amazing to have such like a wide variety of, people with different interests, all, subscribing here and being a friend. So I just feel so great right now because I have some really good people supporting me, some great friends. And so anyway, I want to thank all of you for this. So I want to get to the video. I want to get to the video right now. And I thought to myself, what am I going to talk about today? Am I going to talk about... And it's hard for me to figure out what to talk about because I keep getting all these ideas. I've got so many different comic books that I'm thinking, oh, this one, that one, I could make hundreds of videos because I have so many comic books. But I thought today, after thinking for a long time about this, I'd do something that was related to my last video because it seems really appropriate to me to do something connected with Boris the Bear in a way. Because at the beginning of the last video, Boris the Bear, if you haven't watched that already, you'll hear me talk about the state of the comic book industry at the time in the mid-1980s. So... this book today ties in with that as well, and also ties in with Boris the Bear. So it's a really great follow-up from my last video. So just to encapsulate what I said, though, in the last video, in the mid-1980s, there was a black and white comic book explosion where just about everybody and their brother and their sister and their mother and their father, everybody was getting into the comics industry and hoping to have the next successful Big Bang comic, Big Bang as in, blockbuster where they're going to make so much money and they're going to sell millions of copies. And especially, there's a whole subset in that at that time that was hoping they were going to be the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because they were huge, right? And they weren't from a big company. They were just two guys that did this comic book and had a tremendous amount of success. And, I just got another nice comment, so I was distracted by it right now. So I'll read that later. But, okay. But anyway, so everybody wanted to be the next successful thing. And a lot of them did it by imitating the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The first one being, well, I'll get to that in a second. But the comic book I'm going to talk to you about is called Laffin Gas. Laffin Gas. This is the first issue of Laffin Gas. So, Laffin Gas was published by Blackthorne Publishing, a company which has been much maligned. People have talked about it. The few people have talked about it on YouTube, which isn't many, have said, they put out some shoddy comics, they weren't that great or whatever. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. My opinion is they're a much better company than people remember or give them credit for. Now, they put out some quality titles, but yes, during the black and white boom, they put out some great titles, but they also put out some pretty bad titles as well. I have to admit that. And unfortunately, I think it damaged their reputation a bit. But then again, what comic company doesn't put out bad titles, right? So Blackthorne began, I think it was an offshoot, or some of the people from Pacific Comics created Blackthorne. Something like that, I think, happened. I'm not sure of the details of that right now, but they started off by publishing comic book reprints from newspaper strips, and they kept doing that too, like Dick Tracy, Carrie Drake, Betty Boop, classic comics like that, and reprinting them for new readers. And I thought that was a really nice thing to do. And nice paper, very white, good looking paper in these comics, because some of the comics were on newsprint. Some of the comics were very cheap back then, had like yellowish paper, fading paper. But you see, this is still like very white paper. It's aged well. It's higher quality paper stock than you'd find in some of the comics of the time. So it wasn't like a cheap outfit in their production values at all. And even their logo was very classy to me. I was always attracted to this. Like, even when I was a kid, this is really cool. This is an award. And I thought, hey, that means that this is a prestigious comic company because they have an award as their logo. That's how I saw it as a kid anyway. I still think it looks really cool. So anyway, Blackthorne did newspaper strip reprints, and they started creating some of their... And they're also known for 3D comics. They published a whole lot of 3D comics, if you're into that. They had a lot of licenses in the late 80s where they put like Rambo comics out, a Yo Noid comic, from the Noid from Domino's Pizza, Laurel and Hardy. They had licenses to so many different Star Wars. They find loopholes actually in contracts. Like Star Wars was associated with Marvel Comics, and Marvel put out Star Wars comics. But they found some kind of loophole where they could put out 3D Star Wars comics and not get sued. Like, this is pretty smart, So they did stuff like that. And they started publishing original comics of their own, like their own creations. The first one was Nervous Rex, about a dinosaur, and it was written and drawn by William Van Horn, who has actually worked for Disney after that. He's an amazing animator, cartoonist. So that was a good comic. And then their next one was Tales of the Jackalope, which I can actually show you. Why don't I just do you a quick show? Sorry if I trip over my words a bit, I'm just very excited to be making this, and I'm still new at this. So I'm going to say that Tales of the Jackalope was their next creation from Blackthorne. And it's a really, really good comic book. Beautifully illustrated by R.L. Crabb. He wrote and drew the stories. And it's about Junior Jackalope, who's the rabbit kind of creature here. He's a jackalope, half antelope or half rabbit. I forget. But anyway, he's kind of an everyman rabbit. You can relate with him. And his best friend is Suicide Squirrel. And rabbits are one of my favorite animals, by the way. Just want to say that. And Suicide Squirrel is his best friend. But Suicide is a depressive squirrel, so you can't really relate with him, And squirrels are hard to relate with anyway, right? Because they're weird and they run around everywhere and they're very strange, But anyway, he's not like that. He's not like a dumb squirrel, though. Not that squirrels are dumb. I don't want to offend squirrel fans out there or anything. But anyway, he's a very pessimistic squirrel. And Junior is very optimistic most of the time. So it makes for good dialogue between the two of them. And they have adventures in the forest. And they meet humans. And it's a charming comic. It also has a lot of political undertones to it. some of which I might agree with, some I might not. But the stories are so charming that even if the politics isn't your thing, there's still a lot to enjoy, in these comic books. It's like Pogo in that way. If you've ever heard of the famous newspaper strip Pogo by Walt Kelly or Lil Abner by Al Cap, they were great comics, but they also had political undertones underneath. They weren't overt, they didn't overpower you with their ideologies or anything, but they turned out great entertainment that had subtle meanings behind the surface, and that's what's happening with Tales of the Jackalope. It's that sort of comic, and it lasted for well, I've got them all here, so 7 issues in total. Now look at that. This one has no political overtones to it, which is refreshing. It's got a shark, like a stream shark, that comes after jackalopes in this issue, and it's kind of about the fable of why sharks don't like jackalopes and why they hunt them down at certain times of the year, and how jackalope and the squirrel fool the shark and get away from the shark, and it's a fun thing, I love these illustrations. R.L. Crabb was a great illustrator, or is a great illustrator, and he worked for other companies as well, although he's not a famous name. But anyway, yeah, so I wasn't going to talk about that one today, though. I'd have, but I want to move on to Laffin Gas, because this is going to take a while, and this video is going to be long enough as it is. So Laffin Gas is a humor anthology, and it was also one of the first original comic books published by Blackthorne. Now, you're probably saying, why is he talking about that Jackalope comic so much? But it will come into play in this Laffin Gas comic. It really will. So, okay, so the first issue of Laffin Gas, again, this is a humor anthology, so it's satire on popular trends of the time in the mid-1980s. Began in 1986, and it ran until 1988? 87 or 88. So not long. But the first issue is a satire on the state of the comic industry of the time. Mutant Ninja Mutants. So they're making fun of all these comic books at the time that were like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that were trying to jump in on that bandwagon. But it's funny because at the same time as they were satirizing it, they're also a part of it. Because this features an appearance by the adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters. This is the untold story of them. And they were an actual comic. They were the first one to knock off the Turtles comics and become really successful doing it, which inspired all the other ones, as I mentioned in the Boris the Bear video. So they actually make an appearance in this issue, a real appearance by the creators of the hamsters, Don Chin and Parsonovich. And this is the story. You see, Parsonovich's artwork is very unusual, and he got a lot of criticism for that. But I like it. It's weird. It's fun. It's unique. It does take getting used to. I mean, it looks very cluttered and whatnot, but I don't know. There's something just really neat about it. And he also got criticized because the hamsters, when he drew them, didn't look anything like hamsters. Well, that's not his artwork, but this side is. So in this story, it's supposedly about how the hamsters got started, how Don Chin and Parsonovich got the idea for creating the adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters. But it's a joke, it's not the real story, and it's quite funny. It's basically they came up with a lot of other really weird ideas, like Hobotech, which is supposed to be a parody of Robotech, the MSG agents, X-Men, but it's the ordinary X-Men. So they're supposed to be a group of mutant teenage comedians who got operations so that they're not men anymore. They used to be men, so that's why it's X-Men, So So it's all like just jokes. Fish Lords, like instead of Fish Police, which was another popular comic at the time, like I mentioned in Boris the Bear. So you see how this is connected with Boris. So this was a logical comic to talk about after it. But anyway, the next story is a parody of those, is a straight parody of those comics, and it's about the radioactive wrestling rodents. So then we see like a real ad for Hamster Vice, which was a real comic published by Blackthorne, trying to capitalize on this whole thing that was going on. And then the next story is the colossal nuclear Bambino samurai snails. And in this one, the snails are, again, they have like font like the turtles had at the time, lettering. And they kind of look like the turtles, the things they got on. And this one, they're also defeated in this. I think they just like throw some salt down or something, and they get rid of the snails. So it's kind of funny. And then the next one is the adolescent maniacal samurai hares. So now we got some rabbits that go on an adventure, as you can see. So it's another satire. Also, there's a real ad here for the Cold-Blooded Chameleon Commandos, which is another comic by Blackthorne, which was a real comic they were trying to promote, and it's not that good, I have to say. That is one of their comics that's not that great. But you could see, like, there were so many of these types of things, like real ones and fake ones, and the whole line was blurred between satire and, non-satire. There's a parody of, an advertisement for Nervous Rex by William Van Horn, which I was telling you about earlier. And then we have a story about the preteen Dirty Jean Kung Fu Kangaroos. And this is actually a preview of their new comic series that was coming out from Blackthorne. So this is another real one. And it was done by Lee Mars, who is a female cartoonist who had some fame like in underground comics, I believe, in the 1970s. She also worked for Crazy Magazine, a humor magazine, in the 70s. And this one's not bad. I wouldn't say it's great. I have 2 issues. There's only 3 issues, and I have 2 of them. But it's not a bad one. There are far worse animal comics of the time. Some are good, some aren't good, But it was hard for potential buyers to know what was good and what wasn't good. So, the whole market was flooded with these types of comics at the time. So that was the first issue of Laffin Gas. It was making fun of and promoting at the same time these mutant ninja mutants. Okay. Now, the next one is Laffin Gas 2. And what they would do in this humor anthology is that each issue would take on a different subject. They'd make fun of, something, a different theme, basically. So the second issue was taking on the Dark Knight, who is Batman. Now, back in 1986, Frank Miller published I believe it was a graphic novel called The Dark Knight Returns, which was a story about Batman, which was unlike any story of Batman earlier. It was a lot grittier, it was a lot darker, it was more like, I guess, I don't watch superhero movies myself, but from what I've seen, it's more like the modern Batman movies. And comics fans, superhero fans were excited about that because it's like, he's brought adult themes to superheroes, and he's given them a new twist, and he's just made this come alive and done something different and made it more realistic than it's ever been before. And now other people didn't like that. It was hugely successful, but some people didn't like it because he's like, well, he's taking the fun out of comics, right? Where's the fun? But that's a whole controversy, right? But it was tremendously successful. He got lots of awards for it, Frank Miller. And in the mid-'80s, there were so many parodies of Batman, and especially his version of Batman at the time because it was so successful. So you had one called The Pork Knight, where Batman was a pig. Okay, you had one in the Mighty Mites, where the mites made fun of Batman. You had one called Nat Rat, which was supposed to be the best of all of them. And you had a bunch of other ones. So it was kind of getting an old parody subject at the time, but everybody wanted to do it. But so Laffin Gas did it for their second issue, and you see, like, they call it Dark Light, a third less heroic than our regular heroes. Again, I'm not into superheroes, but I do like superhero parodies. I will say that the parodies in this, some of them are fun, some of them are really fun, and some are just really lame, you know. I mean, we have the Dark Knighty as the first story. Then we have the Dork Knight, and this is William Van Horn who did this, the Nervous Rex Disney guy. So this is probably one of the better stories in this issue. Then we have the Bath Knight. You can see in it, like, the Joker here, the Penguin. Parodies of them. We have Fred Hembeck did his own story, The Interview, interviewing Batman. So it was all different forms of Batman, not just Frank Miller's version, but other versions as well. Fred Hembeck was a popular humor cartoonist of the 1980s, who used to make fun of comics mostly from Marvel and DC. And, Marvel fans, and then they really liked him a lot. Because his comics were like insider, like they weren't mean-spirited at all. Like, humor is very gentle humor, is like fanboy kind of humor of these superheroes. I find that his comics are all right, but they don't stand out to me that much, not being a superhero fan and being lightweight kind of. But this was a good story. This was a fun story. And he always turned out quality work. So he could be relied on for that. Here's another comic that Blackthorne published called The Twisted Tantrums of the Purple Snit, which there's only 2 issues of. I have them. I may do a video on them sometime. It's a very weird comic, as you can tell from the title. They also published one called Alien Ducklings, which wasn't that bad. It was okay. Now we have another Batman parody story in this issue where we have Bela Lugosi taking part in it, which is pretty cool. He starred in a movie called The Bat back around 1931. And you see you have all different versions of Batman down here. This is very well drawn, and I thought this is a really interesting story. Really, really interesting. This is probably the best story in the entire issue. And then we have Don Chin and Personovich, the adolescent radioactive black belt hamster guys, did their own version of a Batman parody called the Ye Old Dark Knight. But instead of the Dark Knight Batman, he's an actual knight. And that's their twist on it. And that was funny, too, because Don Chin is a hilarious writer. The Hamsters was the best of those animal comics, the funniest of all the animal comics, in my opinion. So that's the second issue. So a mixed bag, but I would say there's some good stuff in there. The third issue is a parody of cartoonies, which I really thought was weird. Like, what is a cartoonie? Like, I didn't even know what that meant. So what it turns out is it's a parody of Saturday morning type cartoons from the mid-1980s, like He-Man. So that's what this one is. Or, yeah, just those type of cartoons that you see on Saturday mornings back then. It starts off, though, with a parody of the Bugs Ducky Show, which is sort of like a Bugs Bunny type parody. So, and that's drawn by William Van Horn. It's pretty good, a short one. And then we have He-Man, Me-Man, and the Misters of the Universe. This is really neat because this was written and illustrated by a man named Taylor Overby. Taylor worked for a humor magazine called Glad, which was a Christian humor magazine in the 1980s. And his style is extremely influenced by Harvey Kurtzman in the old Mad comics of the 1950s. His stories read like Kurtzman type stories from the Mad comics, and the artwork is very inspired as well. Like, I don't know like who I'd say it's inspired by. I don't like Wally Wood, Bill Elder, Harvey Kurtzman himself. Well, not as much Harvey Kurtzman, but the writing is. Like, I'm not seeing a strong influence to say Wally Wood or Will Elder at this point, but I do get the feeling that it's very reminiscent in some strange way. Anyway, and that's a fun story, especially if you're a fan of the old Mad comics. That's a very fun story. And then we have a story called Citizen Keen, All's Wells That Ends Wells. So it's like an Orson Welles Citizen Kane parody, but it throws in Saturday morning cartoons, Bugs Bunny and Popeye, so like older cartoons as well. What it is, now this is interesting because this character is going to show up in another issue. He's going to have a whole issue of Laffin Gas to himself later on, but this guy is a comic book collector. Trying to see if I get this right now. I read this last year. I've read these a few times, but I still don't remember everything. But, okay, so there's this guy, he looks like William M. Gaines, right? But he's not. He's a comic book collector, and he loves comic books, and he loves old comics like Saturday morning cartoon comics, comic strips, everything like that. So in this comic, he goes to Cartoon Land. The Rocketeer's in here. There's all sorts of things going on here. As you can see, he goes to Cartoon Land, and there's a Rosebud reference. He's dressed like Fred Flintstone. I'm not sure, like, I don't remember the story well enough to tell you more about it, but it's a good story. And apparently it was a fan favorite from people who were reading Laffin Gas, because, like I said, he got a whole issue devoted to him that later on, which you'll see. Then we had Hobotech, the Saggy Saga. We have some Ronald Reagan parodies. There's a lot of Ronald Reagan parodies back in the 80s, since he was the president. Hobotech is a parody of Robotech, which was a big, I think it was Japanese. I'm not sure, but it was like big robots. A lot of those cartoons, I think, were Japanese. Somebody can tell me if I'm wrong. But Robotech, that's what I was saying. Yeah, Robotech was one of those cartoons that was about big robots. I was never into big robots, so I'm not an expert on them. But this is a parody of that. And it's pretty good. It's pretty funny, I'm going to say. And then we have the Smurks meet the Transformers. So parody of the Smurfs and the Transformers. This is a very short one. I'll just read this to you. So the Smurf is like is saying, "Oh boy, this is going to be Smurky," because the Smurfs would say, like, "Oh, this is Smurftastic," or "This is Smurfical." Like, they put Smurf into all different words, right? So here they're the Smurks. So he's like, "This is going to be Smurky." He says, "Everybody up, they're coming. We've got to prepare a big welcome. You guys make the signs and we'll get the food ready. We'll show them a real Smurky time. Here they come. Get ready to give them the Smurk cheer." So the Smurks have found out the Transformers are coming to visit. So they're going to give them a big Smurk welcome. And boom, splat. That's the end of the Smurks. Because the Transformers are big, huge robots. And they just step on the Smurks. And that's it for the Smurfs. So it didn't work out too well for them. It's really silly. I know, it's silly, but it's kind of funny. Written and illustrated by Andy Ice. Lettering by Diane Valentino. Then this is kind of bad taste. Uses for a dead Smurf as like a table lamp, a play toy for your dog, a pincushion. So a lot of people didn't like the Smurfs back then. They thought they were too... some people, when they get real wholesome stuff, which I think is great. Wholesome stuff is great. Kids should watch wholesome stuff. That's a great thing, in my opinion. But some people are like, they thought it was too cheesy, so they're like, oh, those Smurfs, so they make fun of them like this, Tales of the Smurfs. And they made a big deal about how there was only one female Smurf in the Smurfs. So that was kind of weird because all the Smurfs, there's so many male Smurfs and there's only one female. So that was kind of weird, So they make jokes about that sometimes. And of course, we have the adolescent teenage ninja mutant Smurfs here. The Incredible Smurf, like the Hulk and Super Smurf. So different versions of Smurf. Well, Herc Smurf. Herc Smurf. Hawk Smurf is what I'm trying to say. Smurf Quest. Spider Smurf. Swamp Smurf. And X Smurfs. Okay. They published Gumby comics. Gumby was really big in the 1980s. Eddie Murphy used to play Gumby in Saturday Night Live. And it was pretty funny. But his cartoons were really popular. It had a resurgence of popularity in the 80s. I think his cartoons are older than that. Anyway, that was fun. Okay, so number 4 is it's about all the hamster comics of the time. Because there was the adolescent radioactive black belt hamsters, there was Hamster Vice, and there was there might have been more, I don't know. But it's supposed to be about like the fad for hamsters. Because hamster books sold better for some reason. Well, I think one reason is the adolescent, those hamsters, to say it every time, were the first knockoffs. So, they were bound to be more successful. Also, they were funnier, like I said. But Hamster Vice was pretty popular from Blackthorne itself. And on the cover here, you'll note, okay, this is very interesting. So all my rambling about all these comics is going to make sense because it all ties into these comics, see? See, you have Junior Jackalope, and you have Suicide Squirrel from Tales of the Jackalope on the cover. You have Alien Duckling from Alien Ducklings. You have Street Wolf from Street Wolf, which was another Blackthorne comic. You have the Purple Snit down there from Tales of the Purple Snit. And you have Nervous Rex from Nervous Rex Comics, all on this Blackthorne comic book. Very exciting, viewers. Very exciting. So they're starting to parody themselves now. The first story is a parody of Alien Ducklings, one of their other comics, called Alien Hamsterlings. So in the comic Alien Ducklings, these alien beings came to Earth. They're pretty much just bolts of energy, like zooming into Earth, right? And they came to Earth and they said, we want to fit in with Earthlings because we want to take over the Earth. So we want to take a disguise because they could mold their body into anything they wanted, these energy bolts. We want to take a disguise as the most dominant life form on Earth. So instead of thinking humans were the dominant life form, they see ducks. Like ducks are the first animal they meet. And they get this idea that ducks are the dominant life form. So they become ducks. Wait a second. Is that what happened? I don't know. They didn't want to take over the Earth, though, because the ducks were nice. I think they just wanted to fit in on Earth. I think that's what it was. It's been a long time since I read it. So they became ducks because they thought they were the dominant life form. But evil aliens came to Earth afterwards and wanted to take over the Earth and fight the ducks or something like that. And they became pigs because they thought pigs were the dominant life form, from what I remember anyway. But in this one, I think they become hamsters. The aliens. They start off as ducks, but then they become hamsters or something like that. And that was fun. The next one is a parody of Tales of the Jackalope, which is a comic I showed you earlier, and it's Tale of the Hamsterlope. So Jackalope and Squirrel, they get some like nuclear energy, and the Jackalope turns into a big hamster. And look who he sees. Who's that over there? Do you guys remember who that might be? It's Boris the Bear. And now this was after Boris the Bear came out and he was killing all these animals in his own comic book because he was tired of all these other comic books on the stands, right? So here's a bit of revenge. When the Jackalope becomes the big hamster, the crazy hamster, he attacks Boris and he beats him up. You see? And that's pretty sad, actually, because that's how he left Boris at the end. But again, of course, that's not a real story. And in Boris the Bear comics, they're like, oh, yeah, the creator, they had their own answer to that, as you remember. So there's this whole back and forth between these comics, which is really funny at the time. Because again, it's not to be taken seriously or anything. But the next one is a parody of Nervous Rex and Hamster Vice. So it's called Rexter Vice by William Van Horn. So if you know what's going, if you know about all these other comics, it makes this comic a lot better to read, And then an appearance by the Tales of the Purple Snit. The Purple Snit himself. And he usually does really mean things, the Snit, because he's always in a snit all the time. So he's giving haircuts to the hamsters and, baking them and everything and, that sort of thing. So he's not very nice. Then we have the Nightlight Zone, which is, I think, by the same guy that did the Bela Lugosi one in the last one. Stories by Kevin Harville, art by Brian Robles. I don't know if it's the same guy or not. That was in the Batman one. Let me check. I don't see any. Hold on. I don't see any credit here. I'm so sorry, viewers. I'm so sorry. Oh, Hal Lane. No, it's a different guy. Yeah, Hal Lane. But story and art by Matt Rollwagon. Or Rollwagon? No, he did the lettering. Hal Lane. Okay, Hal Lane did the story and art in the other one. Okay, alright. Anyway. So this was different. But anyway, they get involved in this story. The hamsters enter the Twilight Zone in this story. And they get involved with Anthony Perkins in Psycho. They go up to his hotel and they meet him. You see? And there's the shower scene where the hamster's taking a shower. See? And there he is in the shower, the famous shower scene in the movie Psycho. So that happens. And then they get involved at Crystal Lake. And they meet Jason, which is pretty funny. Then they meet Pee Wee Herman. So there's lots of funny things going on there. Legion of Stupid Heroes was another Blackthorne comic, which is really funny. Well, it was sort of funny. It wasn't that great. But it was by Taylor Overby, who I like. His artwork I told you about before. Then we have a parody of Street Wolf, another Blackthorne comic, like I said, called Street Hamster. So really, this is a parody of Blackthorne's own comic books, but just with hamsters in them. Okay, now viewers. Oh boy, you're going to be excited when I show you this because the 5th issue of Laffin Gas is the Boris the Bear issue. Now it's our turn. Special parody issue. So this story is a direct answer. It's one story, this entire comic. And they got all these comics to get together, these writers and artists from the other comics, to get revenge on Boris for killing them in his own comic. And they said, he's become unbearable. You see. So, they take aim at Boris the Bear, and they have like a big splash page here, like Boris did in his own comic. And you see Junior Jackalope there, Nervous Rex, Bugs Bunny, Cutie Bunny, the Turtles, Midnight's the Rebel Skunk. That's probably a preteen Dirty Jean Kung Fu Kangaroo over there. Alien Duckling. So, I'm not going to read this, but they got some of the creators to actually license their character, or not license, but allow them to use their characters in this comic. They're not supposed to be, and some of them didn't, and some of them did. I don't know which ones were licensed and which ones weren't, or whatever the word would be, right? But allowed, I guess. But it's parody, so they can do it anyway. So you see Cerebus the Aardvark there, and you know, all the different characters. There's Boris. So, and I mentioned that there's Boris's treehouse. They did a really good job of imitating James Dean Smith's artwork in the Boris the Bear comics. Pretty decent job, I must say. So he meets the turtles again. So he's meeting all these animals, but this time the turtles beat him up. So they turn the tables on Boris. He gets involved with the preteen Dirty Jean Kung Fu Kangaroos, and they beat him up. Panda Con, which was another popular comic. He meets him. And you can see the different art styles in this comic because a lot of time, like I said, they got the actual creators of those comics to contribute to this issue. So this is a really interesting issue that hardly anybody knows about. And if you're a Boris the Bear fan, you should check this out. Really, I think a lot of them met James Dean Smith at comics conventions and the Boris, other people worked on Boris, and they actually weren't mad at each other. They were just having fun with each other's comics and characters. There may have been a few people that didn't like it, but most of them took it in stride and just, there's Beanie and Cecil there, and had fun with the whole thing. Even Spider-Ham is involved here from Marvel Comics. And Cerebus. And the big thing here is that at the end of it, they don't kill Boris. But they try to tell him, hey, sure, not all these comics are great, but you can't just throw them all out and say that we're all bad without giving us a chance. We all have a right to be on the stands. We all, why don't you just give us a chance? And he said, but besides, you're an animal too. You're a funny animal comic too. So you're just like us, and you pretend you're not, but you are. So just can't we all get along and give us a chance, So that's basically the message in that story at the end of it. And then Boris, if you remember, I think it was number 8, did another answer to this in his comic. At least I think it was to this issue. So that was another very interesting. That's one of the most interesting issues of Laffin Gas. And then the 6th issue is a 3D issue. So if you like 3D comics, which I don't, you would like this issue maybe. The reason I don't like 3D is because I just don't like wearing the glasses when I'm reading, the 3D glasses, because it's hard to read with them on. Like, it's kind of like it's dark, And it's like it's just hard to read with like focusing in it because you got to focus it to get it to work exactly right when you're doing it. You have to hold the comic at different lengths and everything. But it's a good issue though. Like you can't see it that well because it's 3D without the 3D glasses. But there is a Jackalope story in this issue by R.L. Crabb. There's a Hal Lane story, which would have worked better if it wasn't in 3D because his artwork is great. He's got like Laurel and Hardy in here. He's got Peter Lorre. He's got Humphrey Bogart. He's got Bela Lugosi again. So he puts a lot of people from old movies in his comic, which is really cool. John Wayne. And then Arrow Man, which was a creation of Don Chin, the hamster guy, adolescent radar black-belt hamster guy, which is a good, very funny comic too, Arrow Man. And he had his own one-shot later on from Parody Press, which was a company that was owned by Don Chin. Might talk about some other time. We have Nervous Rex 3D story. Then we have one that really makes use of the 3D. This one here. I just wish I could see it better with the 3D glasses on. We have a Taylor Overby story, which is very like Will Elder type, Harvey Kurtzman type, with a Prince Valiant type character. Raiders of the 3D Generator, which is a story I think that didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then a special delivery story. Okay, so that was your 3D issue. What time is it? Whoa, it's getting almost an hour. Better move on with this. It's getting long. Okay, number 7 is a board and sorcery issue. So like sword and sorcery, but it's like they're bored of sorcery. So it's making fun of fantasy comics like Conan the Barbarian and stuff like that. And this was a lot of fun. The first one was a Hal Lane story making fun of Cerebus the Aardvark. And he put the Marx Brothers in it. He always puts the old movie guys in his comics. This story didn't make a lot of sense to me. Maybe if I was more familiar with Cerebus comics, I would have understood it better. But it was still a good story. Then we have Blast, which I think he wanted to spin this off into its own comic, but I don't think it ever happened. It's by maybe Evan Mills and Dave Garcia. Okay. Then we have Stonehead the Barbarian. Taylor Overby. I'm pretty sure. That looked like a dinosaur from the Flintstones. Then we have Make Love Not War, which this is an R.L. Crabb one. So the Jackalope guy, who was very against like the violent cinema and the trend for violence at the time, like in Rambo and stuff like that. I mean, we still have stuff, lots of that around. But, and this is a satire on that, which is pretty good. And then a satire of The Hobbit, The Habit. By Tim Tobolsky. And then Big Snake in the Pool, which is a weird thing. It's like the barbarians are watching the girl in the bar dancing there. And, but these are parodies like of those comics, of those adventure fantasy comics. So that was a pretty fun issue. This newsprint's coming off all over my fingers. You see the black newsprint coming off. So the paper, I was talking about how great the production value was, but the paper in the later issues was cheaper. In the earlier issues, it was better. Okay, the 8th issue is the April Fool's issue. So you might say, what could be in an April Fool's issue? of Laffin Gas when it's humor anyway. And I don't know. I think it might be stories where, I mean, I've read it, but maybe there's like practical jokes in the story. I can't remember why it is the April Fool's issue. Well, like in this story, this is a Panda Con story, an actual Panda Con story, not a satire. And I remember that some joke is played on Panda Con in this one. And then we have this story. That's not that great. I'll move on. And then we have The Message by Taylor Overby. And he doesn't have like the Kurtzman Elder type artwork here. Now he's got a different style of artwork entirely. You wouldn't even know this was the same artist. So that's some versatility there. And this is a pretty interesting story. They all have like some April Fool's reference in the story at some point. Or some of them do anyway. So this is a fun issue. I could just say it's just funny stories. You know, it's just funny stories. So I do recommend this. And it's fun seeing the different styles. You know, for an anthology comic, this is probably one of the best ones I've read. There's a lot of anthology comics. There's so many of them. But this one is pretty... There's a lot of quality in it, actually. Even though, like, hardly anybody knows about it. Laffin Gas number 9 features that character I was telling you about earlier, the comic book collector guy, in Return to Cartoon Land. So he goes back to Cartoon Land, where he went in the other issue. But this is a feature-length story. He meets a lot of different characters from different cartoons in here. His comic collection is, if I remember correctly, if it's this one, is kind of stolen by somebody, and he has to go to Cartoonland to get the comics back, I believe. And the comics are spread all throughout Cartoonland, and as he walks through there, he walks through all different genres of cartoons and comics. So not just the Saturday morning stuff, but he also goes through newspaper strips. You see? So you can see him like walking through there collecting his comic books. Trying to find his lost comics. Beetle Bailey parody there. Beetle Bugsley. Crazy Cat. Of course, I like Sad Sack better than Beetle Bailey. There's Little Nemo on Elm Street, which is pretty funny, because Freddy Krueger would go in people's dreams, and Little Nemo was a famous comic where he would have dreams and go on fantasy trips in his dreams, so they're combining the two of them. We have Ms. Blondie, so a Dagwood and Blondie parody up there too. Then he meets like Mandrake the Magician and all these different characters. Gumby. There's like Astro Boy, I think, in one of those big robots. Definitely like a Japanese style. They're like the anime style. He goes through war comics. This is quite an epic story. This is quite a story, I'll tell you. He meets the superheroes, Wonder Woman, Batman. Like, everything's going on in this comic. And can you believe nobody knows about these comics? Laffin Gas. So I do recommend these. There's a huge scene that goes on at the end here on the moon. I think it's on the moon. So that's quite a story. Number 8. 9. That was number 9, sorry. Number 10 is a censorship issue. 11. Cliffhangers. So in this one, they're making fun of cliffhangers, you know, where they have like an ending in a movie or TV show which leaves you on the edge of your seat and leaves you wanting more. So what's going to happen next? But then you have to tune in to the next episode of the TV show or a sequel to a movie or a movie serial or whatever to find out what happens next, right? Movie serials were really popular in the 1930s and 1940s, where they'd be these like 15-minute movies before the feature-length attraction. And at the end of every one, the hero would end up in some precarious situation, some perilous situation. You'd say, how are they ever going to get out of that? And sometimes they'd be even dangling off a cliff, which is where the term cliffhangers came from. So, and of course, at the beginning of the next chapter of the serial, you would find the hero got out of it in some unbelievable way. So, this is a parody of that sort of thing, cliffhangers. So like a Lone Ranger type guy and everything. So first we have an R.L. Crabbe story of Dutch Lame Duck in the Tomb of Doom, chapter 87. So very much parodies of those old movie serials. And that guy's supposed to be Ronald Reagan that stars in this. Prune Whip Doom. Again, I don't want to get political, so. Prune Whip Doom. Is by William Van Horn, the Nervous Rex guy. And it's a good story. These are all interesting stories. Then we have Jimmy. Well, I'm not going to say that name. I mean, it's his name, but I don't want to mispronounce it or it could be bad. So, he did this one. Jerry. I'll just call him Jerry Fuchs. Because his name is spelled, you know, like Fuchs, we'll say. The Purple Prune and his Roughage Riders. So it's kind of like a Flash Gordon parody. Oh, there's like Calvin and Hobbes are showing up in here. Or Calvin, or... It looks like him. Anyway. Parody of Captain 3-0. Okay. There's that one. Okay. Some of those stories were okay. I don't know if that was one of the better issues or not, but there was a few stories that were good. And then the last issue of Laffin Gas, which is from 1987. Yeah, so it's only 86 to 87. Is the 12th issue. And it's the preview issue of Hot Comics. This is a weird issue, very weird, because what it is it's not actually a preview of new comics. It's a preview of fake comics. So they just imagine different comics that might have come out from companies, and they just make fun of different new comics. It's hard to explain, really. It's a very strange idea because it's really just fake ads for imaginary comic books. Which is just weird that you have a whole comic of that. But I mean, it's funny. It's funny. I mean, like, here's Bambo. If you go down to the woods today, you're in for a big surprise. Bambo. Instead of Rambo. So Bambi is like Rambo. It's pretty funny. And that line, if you go down the woods today, you're in for a big surprise, I think is a line from a song that was really popular in the 1930s called The Teddy Bear's Picnic. People have told me, by the way, that I should maybe also talk about music. I could do videos about music on here, even though it's like I said, it's a comic channel, but I can do whatever I want. It's my channel, right? I can talk about music. I love music, older music, you know, history of music. I could tell you like the history of the recording industry and my favorite artists and, you know, movies I like, and, you know, I could show you some vinyl records or something. So I could do that too if people are interested. Leave a comment below, as people say, if you're interested in that, if you're still watching. So then we have like, okay, Party Animals, right? Metal Light, which is like heavy metal, but which is a magazine, but it was not about heavy metal, by the way. It was a fantasy magazine, but it's a parody of that. Love and Rackets, which is a Love and Rockets, but this is like a Tammy Faye and Jimmy. Was it Jimmy Swaggart or? I forget. It was a whole scandal at the time. I don't really want to get into that either. If it wasn't Jimmy Swaggart, I apologize for that. But it was Tammy Faye Baker and Jim Baker. That's who it was. It's Jim Baker and Tammy Faye Baker. They were in a big scandal, and that was a parody of that. The Come On, Come On, No Way comics. It's kind of pretty funny. So, I mean, I like this because I like weird comics. I don't know how many people this would appeal to, though, but Weemus the Leech, Mel Dandy, the freelance proctologist. So, you know, really funny ideas for comic books that weren't actually published. Snorkel Porky, When Titans Sleep. Yeah. So that's it, really. They got Bozo the Clown there and Fred Flintstone, Gumby. Those were licensed properties. Of course, Blackthorne was publishing. But anyway, there you go. Full run of Laffin Gas right here, folks. I felt like doing Ed Sullivan for a bit there. I was going to go, and now, right here on this really big shoe, we have the Ed Sullivan shoe right now. We have a special look at the Laffin Gas comic books right here from Tom's Comic Curios. So come out here, Tom, and tell us about Laffin Gas right here on our stage. I love doing Ed Sullivan. I'm a huge, huge fan of the Ed Sullivan show. And I've been thinking for a few years now of making a video about the Ed Sullivan show. Because, not to brag, but I feel like I know more about the show than almost anybody on Earth. Because I've done so much research on it. And I just love the show so much. I really like Ed Sullivan. So maybe someday, and there's a YouTube channel, an official Ed Sullivan YouTube channel that posts rare videos every day from the archives. They've been doing it for almost 3 years at this point. I just love that channel, and I always make comments on that channel. So if you see a Tom Smith in the comments of the Ed Sullivan channel, that's me. But anyway, maybe I'll make an Ed Sullivan video someday and talk about Ed Sullivan show. So, these comics almost stood up by themselves. Anyway, Laffin Gas, 12 issues. I do recommend this series. It's a lot of fun. And if you're like me and you like humor, you like to laugh, you like seeing parodies of popular culture phenomenons of the 80s, then you should like Laffin Gas quite a bit. So, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave me comments. Nice comments, because I love these comments. And those comments are going to inspire me, as well as my friends, my dear friends that have been so inspirational to me for this channel. Inspire me to make more videos. I'm not going to do them all the time or anything, but yeah, you guys, you people really make me feel like making more videos when I get feedback like that. So thank you again so much. And I'm going to cut the video off now. So I'll see you all in the comment section in the next video. See you, everybody.